Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the RomaPress podcast. We hope you are doing well. Before we get into everything, the latest with the transfer market, with Matias Soule, everything that has been going on there, we would like to thank our two newest patrons over at Patreon, Nicolas Isarte and Momchil Petrov. We thank you both for your support, and of course, to all of our other wonderful patrons who allow us to do everything that we do here, from the podcast to all of the website stuff. If you would like to join, you can go to patreon.com/RomaPress, get early access to episodes, also other things as well. I did an update about Matias Soule on there a few days ago, regarding the deal, the negotiations, and his agent was kind enough, Andy, to leak some of the stuff that he gave to Sport Italia the following day. Always nice when you can beat out that bozo over there, who I will not mention by name. But if you would like to listen to that, patreon.com/RomaPress, and then just pause very quickly, like, subscribe, all that good stuff on YouTube at RomaPress. We would greatly appreciate it. Matias Soule, Andy. I have spoken. I am recording this in the middle of my birthday celebration for two of my children. I wanted to come down and record, and to break the awkwardness when you have my family on one side, half of whom don't speak English, and then my wife's family on the other side, pretending to understand what they are saying in Italian. So I came down here because, frankly, at this point, I feel like the agent of Matias Soule could have been in my living room today, because I spoke to him more in the previous week than I have with half the people that are outside of this dungeon I'm currently recording from. So this thing, we essentially knew from both Roma and Soule's agent that this thing was coming to a head at the weekend. He wanted to have the deal defined by this weekend. It's not going to happen tonight. We're recording this on Sunday evening. It's not going to happen, obviously. But tomorrow and Tuesday, I think we will see some headway, because there has been some significant progress made in the last few days, obviously, if for anybody who has been following. And again, this is one of the deals where you have an agent who has been very forthcoming to me with a lot of the goings on in regards to this deal. So I've been kept abreast of nearly everything that has been happening. So his agent, Martin Guastadisegno, he's going in between Roma, Juve. The deal for Soule with Roma has been done for 5 to 6 days now. And now it is coming down to, Andy, between Roma and Juve. I said in the update I gave to patrons on Thursday or Friday, all of these days are combining together because, again, I'm speaking to this guy far more than I'm willing to admit. The deal, in my opinion, I didn't think it was going to get to 30 million euros. I thought it was going to end up just below. I thought the final figure was going to end up at 29 million. I said in the update, and then the following day, I know Sport Italia had it. I don't know if Sky Sport did it too. They mentioned almost verbatim what I had said the previous night to the patrons, that what's going to happen is Juve, they were going to turn down the initial offer of 25 million, including bonus, that Roma offered. And then what Roma were going to do is they were going to make 25, the base amount for the deal, add some bonus as well into that deal, and make the final offer be just below 30 million euros, probably around 28 to 29.5 million. Now, we are hearing Juve turn that down, but I haven't been told that. I do think it is going to get done in the next day or two. Obviously, one of the biggest factors as to what will help Roma, and I said this again to the patrons, that, it's finally nice to see, and I don't know if anyone has taken the time to look at it through this perspective. For one of the very few times I can remember during any summer, Roma are the ones taking advantage of another club's desperation or another club situation in the market, or taking advantage of another club being limited in what they can do in the market, and Roma being the ones who actually take advantage of it. How many times do we see Roma? The situation is flipped, and it's Roma, being browbeaten by all of these clubs to get operations done,
Not only that,
not on their own terms.
but also Roma taking if this deal for Soule gets done, Roma taking one of the better players and with huge potential off a rival such as Juventus. Usually
Yes.
it's Juve who act like the hyenas of Serie A and
Mm,
gobble up all the talents, all the best upcoming talents. I mean, think about Chiesa at Fiorentina, Dusan Vlahovic at Fiorentina. So I was wondering, John, I wanted to ask you this question. What do you make of the fact that Matias Soule got called up for Juve's preseason training as opposed to Federico Chiesa, whom we haven't
well,
heard much about in terms of his potential transfer to Roma? He's been excluded from Juve's training camp in Germany. Matias Soule clearly right now is the top target for Roma, and yet Matias Soule gets the call up over Federico Chiesa.
I don't think it is a big problem whatsoever. This was something. Okay, it was this part I have to say. Someone close to the player. I can't say. I can't use this one in a quote. That was that was agreed upon by the parties. That was pre-agreed that he would go, and they would still continue to obviously negotiate with Roma, and that there would be no problems in doing this. I don't know why Chiesa did not get called up. Perhaps because his situation is more precarious from the standpoint of we don't want him here because we know 1000% without any doubts that he is going to go, and we need him to go because they have to monetize that guy. They have no choice with him having 1 year remaining on his contract. They can't afford for him not to get a deal done. They can't afford for him not to find an operation, to find a new club. So they can't afford for Chiesa not to find a solution. So that would be my guess. But I don't think it's a big problem. I don't think it is a big deal at all because this before he even stepped foot back, they get relegated. He's saying his goodbyes to Eusebio. He knows he's going back to Juve, but I am telling you, from the moment he came back from Frosinone, there was not even more than 5 seconds of doubt that they were going to sell this guy. It has been
Same
agreed
thing with
upon
Dean
for
Huijsen.
weeks.
I think same thing
Yes,
with Dean.
yes,
Remember Huijsen, all his time at Roma, he kept saying, "Well, I'm going back to Juve because that's the club I want to play for. I came from there." Huijsen also excluded from training camp. Not a
yes,
single second was entertained that he would be staying because again, Juve, like Roma, like all other clubs in Serie A, that's one thing that ties them all together is
yeah,
everybody needs money. Everybody needs money. Everybody needs money to get deals done. Juve need Turn Kuppenmeyers, okay, from Atalanta. They need him at all costs, no matter how many times Gasperini and Percassi go out to Sky Sport and they say he's not moving. Juve want him. They need the money. Guess what? Kuppenmeyers price tag is, I think, 45 million, something like that. Well, by selling
yes,
Soule, they get 30 million. Maybe they manage to sell Huijsen for 15, 20. There you go. That's your money. So
exactly.
this is the interesting thing is that no matter if you're in the Champions League or not, if you got the pedigree that Juve have versus the pedigree that Roma have, at the end of the day, everybody is in the same position. Everybody needs money. The only team that it has been getting deals consistently done is Inter because they've
Yes,
been signing players on a free. If they've had these agreements for months with the likes of Taremi and Zielinski, they've just won the Scudetto. That's the deals that they're getting done. But when it comes to splashing 12 million for Cabal from Hellas Verona, they let Juventus overcome them.
yeah. It's everyone. Listen, let's be serious. I mean, everybody outside of the Premier League and PSG is in this position. Everybody. I mean, this is this is good. I won't say it's coming to a head because of all the money that has gone into the sport. I still, it's still mind-boggling at times. It's this cannot keep up. It's not sustainable. And I mean, even in the Premier League, look at Everton. Our Dan Friedkin uh,
Yeah,
didn't
we
land the
can talk about that. We can talk about that
yeah.
because
Well,
that's interesting.
let's go there first, and then we can get to Soule. Just very quickly. I mean, he was in the jet. He was about to land the thing. It looked like this thing was going to get done. Um, I had gotten word prior to that announcement on Friday that it was not going through. Um, and the reason they gave was the exact thing that was in the press release, that Everton cited these loans that they had gotten from one of them being 777, I believe. Um, I mean, listen, when you have clubs, even in the Premier League, I mean, that was their second attempt, third attempt to get a deal done with a new ownership group. I,
Yeah, I believe
I
second.
mean,
Yeah, that's it's quite upsetting. Like I can't even imagine what it feels like
yes,
because especially for Premier League fans, they live in a sort of bubble. They live in a sort of bubble where I mean, you look at as you always mention the TV rights. The TV rights of Everton surpass the TV rights of Inter 100%. So
yes.
so Premier League fans are spoiled, and yet even they find themselves in a situation like this where Dan Friedkin is ready to expand to England. Is after Roma, after Can, which Can that was I found that news so funny when it said, yeah, they got an inflated budget now of 4 million. That's the biggest budget for a fourth division club in France. I'm like, wow, that's like the kid in high school that has failed like 3 times and he's like 20 and still sitting in high school. That's Dan Friedkin in the fourth French division. This thing with Everton is very surprising, but it's a good reality check for a lot of the stuff that goes on. 7-7, the 7-7 partners, I believe that's called. 7-7 partners. They've been. Remember when they came onto the scene with Genoa and everything? Uh,
Yes. Yes.
and there was this whole anticipation that this is going to be the future of football, that this is going to be like that Manchester City thing. It's starting to look like that's a one big scam. Okay,
They're tech guys in Miami.
yeah, it's not looking good.
Listen, I interviewed one of the guys. I'm not going to disparage him personally because
No, it's okay.
the last
This
thing
is
I'd
the
want to
show
do
that
is
you
get
want.
sued into existence. But
No, of course.
listen, man, I
Can
said
I
it
just? Yeah,
jokingly that just based out of Miami.
I just want to say, yeah, based
already
out of
the lights are the
when I read
sirens
that it's a
ring.
private company owned by Miami businessmen, all I could think about was of when Al Pacino goes to Miami in Donnie Brasco, and tries to set up a business, and it's a fucking scam as well. And Michael Madsen, who's trying to enjoy himself in Miami in the sunshine. That's more or less the kind of people that I imagine run a company like 777. After this thing, because for Friedkin, who have been so lightning quick in this thing with Everton, just blew up out of nowhere, and then for them to halt it, it means that the situation is bad. And so if the situation is bad in the Premier League, the situation is bound to be bad everywhere else, as well. So Roma, again, we're going back to the transfer market talk. Roma with Soule, that's, in my opinion, that's because a lot of people are comparing it to Juan Iturbe. Um, to
Oh,
Juan,
come on! I've said that. I saw a few people do that.
yeah.
How can you listen? If you want to turn a new page in life, come on.
I don't think the wise
Don't.
idea to apply to football discourse is to keep bringing up things that happened 10 years ago, over 10 years ago. um, we're talking about players that are completely different. We're talking about contexts and scenarios that are completely different. Again, Juve are not getting rid of Sule because Sule is a bad player. Juve are getting rid of him because if they have to point fingers to who they can sell and who can they really monetize off of,
You
that's
can
one of the
mount it.
guys.
Yes.
Who else are you
Yes.
gonna sell? Adrian Rabiot just left on a free. Federico Chiesa is coming off a terrible season, an ACL injury, and an awful Euros performance, and he's got 1 year left on his contract. Weston McKennie is eating pizza with ranch on it. Um, Manuel Locatelli, nobody really knows what his position is at the club. Uh, they got Artur, whom they've been trying to ship to
For
everybody.
2 to 3 straight years.
Yeah, yeah. A
All you can
loan to
find is a loan to Fiorentina, which you have to pay half his wage.
exactly. And then you have Dean Huizen, who again, youngster, came up through the under 23 of Juve. Had what he made 13 appearances for Roma, something like that. As soon as he stepped into Continessa, he got put on the transfer list. They sold Moise Keane for, I believe, 13 million to Fiorentina.
How'd they get that for that
Yeah,
guy? Yeah.
exactly. I'm just saying that's a scam. That's a
Whoa.
that's a scam. And then they got Mattia De Sciglio. Mattia De Sciglio, who who is still alive and kicking, but he got excluded from preseason training camp. So Juve are, just like Roma, looking around in this dumpster fire of a squad, a squad that really underperformed last year. With Thiago Motta, they have to change things up, switch things up, and the only names that attract any kind of attention are exactly Matias Soule and Dean Huijsen. That's about it. So for Roma to be in this position, I'm not saying that this is going to be the deal of the century. I'm just saying it's refreshing to see Roma be in a position that they've never been in, where they can actually go and comfortably take a guy who is one of the best talents in Serie A, without a doubt, a guy that's proven himself on a difficult stage, being coached by a guy like Eusebio Di Francesco, and with a squad that really was awful. Has to show for that with 11 goals, 11 goals and 3 assists. Has always shown good leadership. It's 21 years old and wants to join you. Wants to join you over going to the Premier League. So what is there not to like about this?
That's to even compare him to Iturbe, in my opinion. I just first, I mean, to begin, that is such sort of an easy comparison. It's like, well, come on, it seems kind
I
of
wonder
lazy, in my opinion.
what I wonder why is it obvious, because what, the Juve is involved because Juve don't want to go all the way with the player, because yes, the last time we went after a player that Juve wanted, he turned out bad. I also remember when Juve went out of their way to get Thomas Rincon. Do you remember this, John? 2016,
Yes, just to
2017.
spite Roma.
In January, they got him for 6 months, John. They let him walk 6 months later. They signed him on a permanent deal for 6 months out of spite for Roma.
To spite Roma. Just to spite
So,
Roma.
exactly. So that's what I'm saying, John. It's there is football is constantly shifting, constantly evolving. This situation with Soule is unprecedented for Roma. We've not been in a position like this. It is a situation that is caused by the reality of today's football. It is a situation caused by Juve's desperation for money, just like Roma are desperate to sell the likes of Karsdorp, Tammy Abraham, Chris Smalling. It happens to everybody. Okay, so that's why. And then obviously someone can obviously take great comfort in the fact that Roma are going out of their way to splash a lot of money on someone like Soule, and then say no to someone like Youssef and Nasiri, who just rejected Roma in order to join Fenerbahce. Roma, in that case, also, they felt completely alienated by the fee that Sevilla were asking for. They felt completely alienated by the
Wait
demands
till you,
that the
yeah, well,
player
his
was asking.
wages.
Yeah,
Roma leaked it to everybody today. I mean, the guy wanted 4. They told us 4. His agent is maintaining it wasn't that high. I I know what he's getting from Fenerbahce. It's actually more than 4 when you add the bonus. 4 million net? No, come on.
No, exactly. But
Let's be serious.
isn't this also unprecedented for Roma to actually not go into like a stupid bidding war? Because a lot of these reports that were coming out in recent days eh, constantly talked about a bidding war. Today we find out that there was no such bidding war because Roma just
Yes.
understood that they cannot go out of their way for a player that in the long run is not worth the effort. Okay,
No.
someone like Matias Soule in this Roma project is worth the effort. Someone like Matias Soule right now will make a difference. Someone like El Nesiri will make a difference perhaps now, won't make a difference in 2 years' time. That's the
I
problem.
can't even say he would make a difference now, though. Not the kind of striker I
That to
like
me,
at all.
listen, that to me is no, because that to me is always a question of how functional a player is. I don't need fireworks. I don't need. So I'm not gonna say, for example, there are reports saying Matteo Retegui is a player that Roma like. I don't listen. I'm not gonna laugh this idea off. A guy can have 7 goals in Serie A. He can have those 7 goals under Alberto Gilardino, and maybe he meets Daniel De Rossi. Maybe he finds a context like Roma that works for him, and he goes on to have 20 goals. I'm just saying, no, the functionality of a player is a different thing. But for Roma right now, the decisions have to be projected towards the future. We spoke about this on several of these episodes that we've had over recent weeks with regards to Roma's transfer market. Roma have to be projected towards the future. Signing Youssef En-Nesyri for over 4 million euros per season for a fee that probably was over 20-25 million, something like that. It's a big no-no. It's a big no-no because that's exactly what the Roma of a year ago, of maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago would have done. Probably the Roma that we saw in 2021 when they got Tammy Abraham. Now that's the Roma that would go out of their way to splash 25 million on someone like Youssef En-Nesyri, a guy who did well last season in La Liga, has always been doing quite well. But is he the guy to make the difference in the long term, which is what Roma are interested in? No.
No, I couldn't agree more. And by the way, this thing, because I saw, well, I'll say his name, Nicolo Schira, who I'll just leave it at that. But he was talking about Soule's wages, and I think he said they were 2 million euros net. They're not 2 million euros net. That is not what he was earning. He currently earns, I believe, 500,000 or 600,000 with Juve. Okay, no. The agreement with bonus included, it's like 1.5 million net. Okay, so it's not the 2 million he is speaking of. It's not even that. So the guy is getting a good pay raise, but it's a contract that Roma, it's digestible. I mean, 1.5 for Matias Soule. How can you digest that to En-Nesyri? It's not even comparable. And by the way, we are also talking of someone, and this is where I kind of get lost with the Iturbe comparisons. This guy single-handedly, okay, so he had 11 goals, 3 assists. So that's 14 total goal contributions. Go Google how many goals Frosinone scored the entire season. He was responsible for a third of their goals. A third, okay?
Good old Eusebio.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Tactical attacking genius. Listen, I for the life of me, there are things to complain about when it comes to the market of Roma, but I will just repeat something I said to the patrons on Thursday or Friday when I updated about the Soule thing. Can you think back, okay, to a summer? And I said, as much as I love the guy Sabatini, that guy, he was like what's her Oprah, the talk show host Oprah from the United States, just giving away. You get a car, you get a commission, you get a commission, you get a commission, you get a commission. I mean, the guy just. You want to talk about horrible contracts? He was the king. He was the king. Monchi was the king of not only commission but just shit deals to begin with. Man, I have to say, Gisolfi, the patience he is showing, as frustrating as it may be for supporters
That's
to
what I
see.
wanted. Yeah, that's what I wanted to touch upon, John. You say the word patience.
I love it.
Yeah, but a lot of people right now, people are getting nervous. There's a lot of,
No,
there's, as
no.
always with social media, there's a lot of nervousness because there is the equation right now is patience, meaning in lack of activity.
Oh,
Patience
come
as
on.
in interpreted as Roma are doing nothing. The thing about the market is, as we said on the last episode, we talked about how dynamics change, and that's the most perfect example of this is Youssef En-Nesyri, who takes about 2 weeks to decide between Roma Fenerbahce, gets the Fenerbahce president to openly come out and start blasting him, saying our patience is ending. We have no more time. Needs to say something right now. They give him an ultimatum. He goes from thinking, maybe Roma, that's an interesting option, to then, in the end, going, well, the money in Turkey is good. That's how it works. For Roma, so the market always depends on so many variables. You get these deals. So, for example, this Youssef En-Nesyri deal, if I understand correctly, was all run through an intermediary who also happens to be Eduardo Bova's agent. You
Yeah.
know, these are the
Yes.
intricacies that you have to take into account when you talk about the market. It's not a team has a direct line to the player. It's everything is a network of variables that you have to take into account when a deal can happen, has to happen, will not happen. So many things can go wrong and so many things can go well. That Roma are obviously in a state of patience because they have to, for example, now there is talk about, I want to mention just this. There's this player, Samuel Dahl. Okay. Nobody knows anything. I would be foolish to even try and say anything about him. I don't watch the Swedish league. I doubt that you do too. Um, the
No.
thing with Dahl is Roma know that this is a player who wants to join him. They're ready to offer for him a certain amount of money, but the team that owns him, Djurgardens, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, which I highly doubt, would like a higher fee that has come from the Premier League. But the player also has a say in the matter. So for Roma, it's a question of
Correct.
patience. It's a question of waiting for the player to help them get the deal over the finish line, for the team, for the Swedish team, to actually think about it and say, well, you know what? At the end of the day, what's the difference? Like how maybe this will be better for his development. It That's how the market works. Sometimes you see these deals get done in a matter of hours because that's opportunity. Remember Henrik Mkhitaryan to Roma, all like that in an evening. But that's opportunity. That's opportunity. That's what Roma have always. This is a matter of waiting to get the moment right, not overpaying. Because as soon as we said, if you get into a bidding war, you will lose. Long term, in the future, you will lose. If you let a team drag you into a bidding war, Roma don't have the means for it, and they will not have the means for it in the future. So it hasn't worked in the past. Getting into bidding wars, it will not work right now and in the future.
Well, and you mentioned the agent of Bove. To reference him specifically, I'm just trying to maintain my composure when I'm reading back at some of my messages with him. This is a guy who is terminally online, so he will throw out fake stuff all the time, and whilst doing so, he will unironically say to you, he likes to use the term "fake news." So that's the kind of it he is basically feeding to all of these websites saying, "Oh, Roma are interested, Roma are interested, Roma are interested," knowing damn well he's just trying to create a storyline. But that is what happens when you have somebody who lives, again, someone who is terminally online, as they like to say. Um, I He said something to me about being fake news, and I said back to him, "Are you referring to the tweet of Biafra?" Uh, and he says, yes, exactly. It's all fantasy, fake news, and three different messages. He couldn't fit all of that into one, apparently. But when you have a terminally online agent, it's going to create, as you would assume it would, a chaotic story. So I just want to get back to this one thing about Gisolfi, because this is where it's not one of those things that jumps off to you in the moment when you're growing impatient about Roma wanting to sign a guy. But just look at the situation that has sort of unfolded with Soule, and look at the things that have happened in the recent days. Okay, so because you have Leicester City who are there, very interested, even though it has been made clear to Roma by Soule himself and to his agent that they only want Roma. They're not interested in moving to the Premier League. But Leicester City are there, better offer. They go all the way up to 35 million euro. It so typical in the past of Roma would have been for you see Sabatini just to add 2, 3, 4 million more euro into the deal just to get it done over the line because he's impatient, he's worried, he's scared.
Roma were ready to do that for Soyuncu when Mourinho wanted him. Roma were ready to go into a bidding war for a guy like Soyuncu. So that's all I'm saying.
Well, right, and it's one of those things where when it happens right away, it's easy to call somebody, astute, a very astute move because they didn't want to lose a player, so they closed the operation very quickly. And by the way, I am also in part trying to, because you just mentioned Jose Mourinho right here, I saw something crop up about Calafiori, how magically now we're finding out that Jose Mourinho wanted to have a buyback option on Calafiori. Is that the thing I'm reading? I forget, but one of the...
Really? You found that? Jesus Christ.
No, it was one of the pro Jose Mourinho accounts on Twitter, and they said something to the effect of... they didn't want.
He always knew. The chosen one.
Right.
The
It's funny how it's funny how they always know when things work out well, but when it doesn't work out well all this time later, you never hear a word. Funny how that happens. I always knew, writing all that shit I did about Alessandro Crescenzi when I said he's a guy who could play on the left and the right and will be the new Panucci of Roma.
You will never get over that.
I just knew he was going to be crap. I can't even tell you if he is still a professional footballer.
Will you get over that? No,
I mean, some of the stuff I've written in the past, man, is just it just jumps off to you. But I just have to go back to this Calafiori thing, man. But the absolute retconning of events that led to him leaving.
I just want to say Crescenzi still plays Serie D. John, he's 32 years old. He's 32 years old.
32. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's time to call it today.
Oh my gosh, that makes me want. I might start crying. My gosh, he's 32. I love this retconning though. I mean, Andy, you would have thought Roma let Calafiori of the present day just walk to Basel. Can we just? There was a reason he had to go to Basel. Okay. Do you think if Roma had the opportunity to sell him for more, they would have cared if he went to Torino, Genoa, wherever? No, of course not. They had to send it to Basel because that was the only club they could get to pay anything for him.
Yeah.
And by the way, 40% buy on.
And the player that left, and moreover, the player that left Basel was nowhere near the player that we saw at Bologna. I remember people when Bologna started doing well at the beginning of the season, people started to Jesus Christ, are you seeing that Calafiori is playing as a center back?
Yes.
Is that him? Because Calafiori coming out of Basel was still not the Calafiori that we saw at Bologna. That's what happens when you get the right context. That's all that matters. But because Basel was not the right context for Calafiori, Basel was just a place where he could get some minutes, which he wasn't getting at Roma under Jose Mourinho because it just didn't work out. Mourinho didn't trust him enough. The player wanted more playing time. That's what he got at Basel to get himself back into motion after those terrible injuries. But at Bologna, he changed completely. At Bologna, all of a sudden, he's not playing fullback anymore. He's not playing out on the wing. He doesn't have to run up and down the flank. He just has to play as a center back in Motta's system, and that's what happens when the context is right. So it's weird. It's this looking back on things, changing history. It doesn't really work, and sometimes that's football. You get some things right, you get some things wrong. I remember when Roma fans were upset that Tuminello is not playing over Edin Dzeko. When Edin Dzeko was starting to miss. Well, not starting to miss. Well, what Edin Dzeko started to have. Remember that second season, we do well in Champions League. Edin Dzeko, after having like 29 goals in Serie A the previous year or whatever, he does fairly bad in Serie A. Everybody's calling for Tuminello. Can you even tell me where Tuminello is right now playing? Is he a player? I want to know that. I'm going to Google it right now. But that's what I'm saying. You have these, some things go well, some things go wrong, you know? That's, I think that right now we're talking about Calafiori, who's about to join Arsenal. Roma, if everything goes well, will earn about 10 million, something like that. Great. But that's in no way, shape, or form the player that left Roma. It's a big credit to Bologna scouting. It's a big credit to Bologna Sartori, who saw, along with Motta, maybe he needs to bulk up. And if he bulks up, if he works on this and then that, he could make a good center back. That's what I mean. When people say, oh, why are you going after Soule? He's the exact copy of Paulo Dybala. Is he?
Yeah.
And will he? And does he have to be? Because he's 21 years old. Okay, him and Tommaso Baldanzi have still so many ways to grow.
Yes.
They can become anything they want if Daniele De Rossi or whoever looks after them will mold them accordingly. Because at 21 years old, just like Calafiori at Bologna, you have no way of determining what kind of player you are. You can do just about anything. Kind of like when Dean Huijsen was at Roma, right? Daniele De Rossi said, "I see him in the future as a midfielder. I don't see him as center back. I don't see him as a defender. I see him in the middle of the pitch." And there's Gerard Piqué. Who remembers Gerard Piqué? Where does Gerard Piqué start?
Right.
Gerard Piqué starts playing in the attack for Manchester United. Okay.
Yes.
So where did he end up? As a center back. There you go.
Yeah, and on top of it too, the thing that bothers me with Calafiori, there was nobody complaining at the time. Nobody. There was nobody complaining at the time. And secondly, as you just mentioned, this thing of the change of position. Okay, there were all of these teams in Serie A for all of these years who could have acquired him from Roma. Even when he was coming back from the knee thing, he recovers, still doesn't able to get consistent minutes at Roma, and we see what happens. He ends up leaving, obviously, for Basel. But the thing that bothers me is it took somebody to proactively. You had Thiago Motta, as you said, proactively make a change of position to him. Nobody else thought to do that. Okay, you had one person. I won't say they won a raffle, so to speak, but it took some creative thinking. Essentially, what I am trying to get at is all of these things, these events happen in a vacuum. You don't get one without the other. He has to hurt his knee. He has to not play at Roma. He has to go to the Swiss league.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct.
You do not get that guy. Okay? Let's be very clear here. Andy, as a left back, if we are not having an intellectually honest discussion, if we are trying to pretend that as a left back, this guy was setting the world on fire.
No, he wasn't.
Unimpressive.
He wasn't. We kept waiting and it didn't happen. And that's okay, John. Guess what? It happens. That's what happens. Okay? It's what happens. Some players fail at some teams and do better at other teams. Okay, I was just on a Manchester United thing, and we were talking about Zirkzee, and I mentioned Alexis Sanchez because I said they asked me who does he remind you of, Zirkzee? Who does Zirkzee remind you of? And I said Alexis Sanchez, but at his Arsenal days, Alexis Sanchez thrived at Arsenal. Was terrible at Manchester United. It happens. And it happens more so when you're young, okay? Guess what? Maybe Iturbe goes to Juve and does brilliantly, and maybe he becomes the next Messi. Who knows? We will never know. That's the secret of the sport. That's what makes this sport wonderful and terrible at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Events happen, in sequential. We can't just bypass all of these things that led up to the final product we had today. To blame Roma, and I don't know if it was a quote or something, but I'm fairly certain that this pro Jose Mourinho account, they pulled up a quote of Jose Mourinho saying, "I wanted some sort of buyback option, or I wanted something else." I mean, come on. Do you think he would be bragging of this if Calafiori
There was,
is you know?
by the way, there was never any. Mourinho never asked for anything like that.
I,
Mourinho was just happy to see him
he
gone after
probably
that.
helped the guy
After,
pack his bags.
yeah,
He had
after
opportunities with
Bodo,
every manager, man.
after
Every
after
manager gave
Bodo,
him a chance.
after Bodo, Mourinho was done with Calafiori, Amadou Diawara, Gonzalo Villar, and so many
Mayoral.
others. He was not waiting around to see if Calafiori, out of all people, would be a good center back. And it happens. Those are
Right.
decisions that happen. We move on. Okay. Mohamed Salah, another player that Mourinho never took into consideration. He has to go to Fiorentina because of it. He has to go to Roma
Correct.
because of it. He becomes a good player at Roma. He becomes an amazing player at Liverpool. That's the path that he had to take.
Right.
And that's the path that is applies to so many other players. So I find it completely ridiculous to question these things, because it's part of the sport. You take it or
Yes.
leave it.
Yeah, and on top of it too, I mean, the times we've seen supporters wanting to put the halt on a deal being done with a younger player involved into it. The particular flavor of the month, we can go down the list. There is no shortage of deals like that. Soule, in my opinion, it will get done in the next few days. I do think it will get done. Leicester no longer in the race. He wants Roma. It's going to happen. We will leave it there. So until next time, ciao.